Hey, I'm Jason Harrell.
And I'm Justin Boyd.
And let's freaking do this.
Welcome to episode number 24 of Let's Friggin' Do This. My name is Justin Boyd, and once again, I'm thrilled to be joined by my good friend and musician, Jason Harrell. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing great. I'm doing really well today. I don't know why. I'm energetic. I'm happy. I'm
Just loving
happy.
life, loving
Yeah,
work.
man.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I got some good sleep last night. That's part
There
of
you
it.
go.
I did that hike this weekend,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I don't even know if you and I talked about it much, but I did the ultimate hike this weekend with Meredith, for the Cure Search fundraiser.
Mhm.
And I've been limping around the house ever since.
Paying
It was
for it.
26.2 miles.
That'll do
Uh,
it right there. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a hike.
it's 26.2 miles around Lake Georgetown, and I was going into it. I didn't think I was gonna actually be able to finish at all because I've had plantar fasciitis for like months, and so I haven't been able to run or do anything. And it was really killing me. And then about the second resting stop, I took some ibuprofen, which seems like an obvious thing to do when you have pain like that, but I
Yeah.
have not been doing that. And I took the ibuprofen at that rest stop, and within about half an hour, it's my foot stopped hurting. Now other things started hurting, but but my foot stopped hurting, and I was able to finish, and my foot was killing me by the evening, but when I woke up the next morning, I'm sore. I'm sore all over from the
Yeah.
hike, but my foot is feeling good, so maybe that's part of why I'm in a good mood.
Yeah.
Feet, they always say feet are the key to happiness. I think
Is
that's
that what they say?
no one says that. No one says
No,
that.
well, you just said it. So
I just made it up. Yeah.
that's actually going to be our motto for our
There,
podcast from here
we've been looking
on.
for a motto. Again, this is episode 24. We haven't had a motto until this
Yeah.
one. So
It's like
Good slogan.
let's
yeah,
freaking do this, and then feet are
feet are the key to
key
happiness.
to happiness. There you go.
So there's no good transition to this, but
There
Jason,
really isn't.
we really like put ourselves in a corner. Like
Yeah, we did.
we don't really help ourselves with this little, this witty banter we have back and forth. But Jason, would you like to introduce our guest for this evening?
Yeah, we have Mr. Clint Roberts, all the way from North Carolina. Sorry, I think we actually talked about, you guys might have talked about exactly where you're at, but I know it's near Asheville. The notes say Brevard, is that right?
Yeah, well, I'm from Brevard, and I live
Brevard.
in West Asheville now, and
Okay,
yeah, so you got it right.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, I said the name of Brevard wrong.
nah, it's okay. It's I think there's a Brevard County in Florida,
Mm,
and so
Right.
like it's the exact same spelling. Either
yeah,
pronunciation is totally common,
yeah.
but locals call it Brevard.
I have a friend here in the neighborhood that we live named Perry Savard.
Right, and it
But
looks like severed.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so we have Clint here. Clint is a singer-songwriter, who, and I was just telling Clint earlier, I think that I became aware of Clint in 2021, maybe early on in 2021. It was before that 2021 was when uh, your first album, or the album that's out that we can still get to, I guess. We can
Yeah,
talk
right,
about that a
right.
little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the album that you have out there, the Rose Songs, was released in 2021, and I think I started seeing posts from you before it was released. There was a video that you put out, I believe. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so that it
Yeah.
came up on
Oh,
my
sorry, didn't mean to
radar,
cut you
and
off.
I listened, and I loved it. It's fantastic songwriting, fantastic production of the album, and your voice, I think, has been noted, I think, in more notable uh, places than us, but You have a fantastic voice, so your vocal abilities, I think, is where a lot of this stuff kind of centers around and it shines. But welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, man. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, thanks Jason and Justin for having me on the show today. It's I'm stoked that you found the music. You never know who's going to hear it, and it's great to hop on a call and get to talk about it for a little bit.
Yeah, speaking of your music, I wanted to start off with your most recent work. And so about a year ago, it's like May of 2022, you put out an EP. The EP, I got the art here. So it's called Holler Choir, right? So
Hmm.
it's got 5 songs. It's a very it's a great listen. I enjoy the music. And then, I come to find out that like not only is this like a song, or not, I mean, not this is like an EP or an album title for you, it became something much more. And I just want you to talk about that a little bit, like what this EP means to you and what it obviously has led you to what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, as Jason mentioned, I put out Rose Songs in 2021. And that would, I guess you could say that you could call that my record label debut. I had put out records prior to that, which I'm sure at some point we'll talk about. But um, often what you encounter in sort of these sort of record label debut situations is that, you might have been collecting hundreds, in my case, really just dozens, but hundreds of good songs before you get that break with the record label. And, if you've got stuff out that maybe didn't organically do so well by itself, a lot of the time record labels want to kind of see you do a hard reset. And in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done that, after having been through that process. But in any case, I re-released a lot of songs that I had written before on Rose Songs, which is very much so a straight shooting kind of Nashville Americana slash kind of. It's kind of got a little bit of that pop country polish that you hear in Nashville, like on down on Music Row, kind of Ocean Way kind of sound, and it's great sound. But to kind of getting back to your question, from exiting Rose Songs, I moved back to Asheville, sort of started reconnecting with my musical roots here and the tonalities that I grew up around and the instruments that I grew up writing songs on. I predominantly play guitar now, but I started in high school when I really started writing songs and being serious and putting myself out there. Banjo was sort of my intro into songwriting and playing music. And so I started on 3-finger style banjo. And so Holler Choir, aside from several, there's other facets to the thesis that are unrelated to to what I'm about to talk about. But a big part of Holler Choir is just coming back home and sort of reconnecting with the music that I grew up around, not necessarily the music that I chose, if that makes sense. Or at least like not the music that I like, I guess you could say like it would to go after sort of a more Red Clay sound as an Appalachian artist was sort of a rebellious thing that I did in my early 20s, whereas Holler Choir is sort of transitioning back into okay, I this is more rooted in the region that I'm actually from. And aside from that wasn't really my only motive in it. It was but there's a lot of motives in it. But to put it succinctly, I saw I missed working with banjo. I missed working with fiddle. I missed working with stand-up bass. And for a few years there, prior to COVID, but in the lead up to Rose Songs, I was largely working with piano, pedal steel, electric bass, drums. And I still love working with those instruments. I'm still synthesizing those sounds back back into my music. But Holler Choir was our kind of first foray into what does it look like when a Clint Roberts record is fully acoustic again. So yeah. Yeah.
So when you so you kind of reference this as kind of like a coming back to kind of like your roots, your foundations, or whatever in a way. Before Rose Songs, before you put out Rose Songs with the sort of the label, going the label path, I
Hmm.
know, and I kind of mentioned this right away. I know, and doing my own Googling of you and finding some things out there. There
Sure.
were obviously some releases before. Were those more along this line, or were they kind of just
Yeah, Hamlet Blues. So I have an album called Hamlet Blues that is. I think what I'm gonna do sometime soon is, aside from the Holler Choir EP, which is going to be put under the Holler Choir band moniker, and then
hmm
I'm going to work on that project moving forward. My intention in the near future is to kind of lasso up my records that I made before I did this Holler Choir thing and put them out on Bandcamp under my name and say, hey, here are my solo records. There's not a tremendous amount of people that want to hear them, but there are a good amount of people that it's proven to be kind of an unfortunate cycle just due to circumstance that I've had to put records up and then take them down and then put them up and then take them down. And I think it would be nice for people to see sort of the progression.
hmm
But to answer your question, Hamlet Blues was a good bit more aligned with Rose Songs in its tonality. Um, Although what happened with Rose Songs, so you get to Nashville and you get to the studio, and the studio band doesn't know you from Adam. They're just pros. They
right?
to put it crudely, crap out great records all day, every day. And
Yeah.
so we're sitting around and talking, and we're like, who are your inspirations? What do you want this to sound like? I'm like, well, like a good bit of my inspiration is someone you probably know quite well. I was like, a good bit of my inspiration is Jason Isbell. And with Rose Songs, they just took that and ran with it. And
Yeah.
I love it. I think it sounds great, but I didn't have, we only had 2 days to cut Rose Songs. And so, and 8 of those songs were cut in one day. So there was no, as good of a record as it is, I just had to be happy with whatever came out on the other side. There was no feedback whatsoever in making that record, which was very new to me. Prior to making that record, I had only ever made records with my friends, and
hmm
not necessarily, now the intersection of quality musicianship and people that are in my social circle, those things pretty perfectly overlap these days. But when I was first, I was making records in college, and I kind of just hired who was able to play that instrument at that time. And so I get to Nashville, and cut that record, and everyone can play the song more amazingly than anyone I've met prior to that, but they don't really know me, and they don't really have context to what I'm trying to do. But that being said, I had a lot of creative power in Rose Songs, and I got to, it's like not in tracking, but in the edit and sort of in the how the songs were ultimately presented. I had a lot of power in that, and so that's where I was able to sort of lasso that record back in and make it more of a reflection of who I am artistically. Um, I'm sorry, I kind of may have gone a few different directions with that, but right. So to answer your question, Hamlet Blues was in line with Rose Songs as far as the tonality. The record before that, which is one you may have also found, it's my first record, is called Where the Heart Is.
hmm
And that's actually in a way a little bit more in line with Holler Choir. That's kind of what I cite as my musical roots. Um, it's it's a little less Appalachian and a little bit more, I guess you could say, pop folk in a way. I was 19 when I made it, and
hmm
at the time, I was 19, and at the time, the biggest bands in the world that had banjos in them were like Lumineers and Mumford and Sons and stuff. And I respect the heck out of all that stuff. It's not quite what I'm into these days. I've kind of gone in different directions, but that was pop. I guess you could say that first record that I put out was very much so kind of pop folk inspired. And I kind of gravitated towards Americana with Hamlet Blues and Rose Songs. And now I'm kind of finding a new sound. I guess you could say with the Holler Choir EP and the record that we just cut that should come out by late summer, I've found a much more concrete thesis with what I'm trying to do and like what unique expression that I'm trying to put out in the world, I guess you could say. As good as valid and as good as the records I think are that I did before that. It's more just that I feel more like aligned with a specific vision, I guess you could say.
I think there's this may be too like lofty or whatever philosophical or something, but like I think there's just a tendency for people, even if you're talking about like outside of music, like to just kind of um, or at least in the direction that we want it to go, like people tend to like become more themselves. You
Yes.
know, like as you get older, you kind of start to realize I don't have to do these other things that I thought might be cool. I just have to
Right.
do the things that I am. I have to be the person that I am. But like, it seems like that's kind of the trajectory you're kind of describing with your music, as you're just kind of like coming into what feels more like you.
Absolutely, and something to your point, what you just said is entirely correct. But a lot of musicians, I've heard a lot of other musicians who, when they start writing songs and putting them out there, when you start doing that, most of the time, this isn't the case in every case, but most of the time, your frame of reference really is your heroes. And
Hmm.
so, when you're a fledgling songwriter at the age of 16, 17 or so, um, your primary way of learning outside of just sort of exercising that muscle and like learning how to do that, it's inevitable that what you do is probably going to be to some degree imitation of what somebody else. I mean, I think all art is in a way imitation.
Hmm.
People just find their specific spin on it as they get older. And so to your point, like it's now in my late 20s where I'm starting to get a sense of like, okay, there is like a unique vision that has presented itself to me, and I feel very strongly about it. And when I arrived at that vision, it was this aha moment where I was like, oh, cool, I don't have to worry about anything anymore. I know what I'm trying to do with
Hmm.
Holler Choir and know what I'm trying to and I'm trying to, well, to put it as concisely as I can, I'm trying to make sort of a new kind of contemporary Appalachian sound. I'm trying to work on an Appalachian sound that people don't really have like too much reference points for by the time it comes out. I think with Holler Choir, especially that EP, um, I feel really proud about that EP because I'm sure you guys can hear influences. I'm sure everyone can hear influences, but I can't really point to one or two other artists with it that I'm like, oh, this is just some imitation of someone else, and that might be that might just be wishful thinking and and bias on my end, but
I
that's at least how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I think well, I think when I hear what you've done with Holler Choir, um, well, probably the most distinctive thing for me that stands out is your voice. Um,
Thanks.
there's there's the instrumentation that's kind of the traditional instrumentation that you might hear in like bluegrass type stuff, but then you've got it all like centered around your voice and your the structures of the song.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I think it is unique. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what you were saying, but like
Yeah, yeah,
it's unique. It's not. It doesn't seem whatever you might want to call it, derivative or whatever,
yeah.
like an imitation of something else. I hear I hear something that's unique and
Thank you.
interesting to me. I'm also a big fan of I say this kind of music, like the traditional instrumentation and the bluegrass sounds in general. I'm a big fan of. I was always a fan of bluegrass. I mean, sorry, wrong side. I had a fiddle hanging behind me over there,
Oh, heck yeah.
and I got a banjo sitting over here in the corner. So,
Heck yeah.
but like so, and I kind of like I can kind of identify with your kind of the journey that you're describing. Not that I ever had like a record label type experience or whatever, but I've explored other kinds. I've explored putting out music that didn't really wasn't really me,
Yeah,
um, and also at the same time like going back to kind of the stuff that I played and was around as a kid. That wouldn't really be me exactly either. It's like
sure.
something along the way that has like I've kind of come back to a lot of that kind of instrumentation and that kind of like I play fiddle. I'm working on an album now that'll probably have a lot of fiddle and dobro and stuff like that, but there'll be some electric guitars and it'll be very chorus driven and stuff like that. So it'll be it'll be not exactly like I say, not what I grew up with, but it'll incorporate a lot more of that stuff than what I thought I would when I was in my 20s, which was a long time ago. But anyway,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah,
um,
I absolutely relate to that. And it's not to say I don't want to say all this to say that like, I don't see myself in like my previous records per se.
hmm
I think it's just part of the journey. And and as you say, you kind of course correct as you jump from creative lily pad to lily pad, and you get a sense, you get a more cohesive sense of what you really want. And I think where in Rose Songs, which is, was a fairly well publicized record, I think where I really shine through is in the songs and in the singing. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that about the singing. I think with that record, like, there's still a huge part of me that's in that, and I still play those songs. So as you could tell on the Holler Choir EP, I re-recorded um, I re-recorded a few of the songs from Rose Songs, and I'm actually going to do that again for a Holler Choir because we play most of the songs off of Rose Songs still. We've just never have done that show. Um, that show that record was made, and that's another bananas story. Actually, I think it's always a fun one. So if you want to get into just how Rose Songs came to be, like the nature of getting into that, I always love talking about that. I've never gotten to play. I've gotten to play the Holler Choir EP in the sonic presentation that's comparable to the record. I've never gotten to play Rose Songs quite like that,
okay.
uh, and that's because I like it was like shortly after moving home, COVID hit, and so all bets were off on uh, doing shows for a while. And
Right.
Rose Songs was made in its entirety. It was sort of yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to not bog you down with too many details about it, but Carry On was the label that I was with on the record. And like I said, we recently split amicably, and I wish them the best. But they did something that was kind of crazy at a time when it was like the most risky thing they could do. So in the weeks before COVID hit, I had management based out of LA. They were helping me kind of negotiate, like not really, we weren't in the negotiation phase, but we were shopping the songs to various record labels, trying to get someone to bite. And we were getting closer and closer to that. We found a great producer, all these things. COVID hits, all bets are off. All the record deals all the record companies that we were in talks with are like, until this blows over, we're not like doing anything. And so I had gone from, you know, getting close to like, maybe not necessarily making a breakthrough record, but at least getting my first shot at it. And COVID hits, everything dries up, all of it's gone. I'm back home. I'm probably like no gigs. I'm probably home alone drinking probably a little bit more than I should be.
Like we
Because
all
like
were
just
during
yeah,
that.
right, absolutely, as we all were. And then this label that had talked to me in a vacuum, they had talked to me months before, and they said, "Hey, we have an offer for you. Don't sign any other deals with anyone else until we make our offer, if you don't mind." I'm like, "Sure, I'll hear you out. Nothing else is really coming to fruition." Then they said, "Also, this is exclusive to your current management agreement." I was like, "Okay, that's fine." Or like if I like the deal, I'll take it, like, because nothing's nothing's clicking. But COVID hits, everything else dries up, but that label, Carry On, still wanted to make a record, and they had the funds ready to go to do it. And I was like, this is so wild. Like, we're in lockdown. And so in June of 2020, we go to Nashville. We record this album. So if you go back and watch the live video for Nero's Waltz, that's in the studio, you know, we make this album, you know, Brian Sutton's playing guitar on it. A lot of other like beefy session legends from Nashville are playing on it. And we're all in masks. We can't look at each other. We've never met before. We make this record in a couple days at a fraction of the cost because no one was making records at that time. Right. And then Rose Songs comes out, and you know, yeah. So that's the quick and skinny, is that somehow I got lucky enough to make that record during COVID. It wasn't something. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something, and work on it. What was so bizarre about it was that up until that point, I had never had an opportunity like that. But everything around me, as far as I was concerned, the world was ending. It's like, oh, I get to work on my dream album, but don't. But so it's very peculiar. I'll always remember it, and it's a very entertaining way to try to start a career. But,
so you recorded it all in Nashville basically in 2020, right? Is what you're saying, right? So you recorded it all in 2020. You were able to get all that done, and you're still in. When did you leave Nashville? I guess you left Nashville, obviously after it was released, right?
Well, so yeah, and that's where like some of the timelines get a little confusing. So I recorded it in Nashville. I actually was living back home in Brevard. I had moved. So I moved to Nashville in 2016 and left in 2018. And then in 2018, I had moved back to Brevard and started hustling like the brewery circuit really hard. And so like in 2019, I did about 120 shows that I had booked with the help of a friend, just playing like any brewery that had a couple $100 that was like play 3 hours. And, you know, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter. We don't care what you play. Just take this and you can have some tips, you know, you can put out a tip jar. And so my entire 2019 was, and I'm sure it's the case in a lot of, you know, as you guys know, breweries have popped up all over the country, but Appalachia with its high concentration of like really good, clean drinking water, there's breweries everywhere. Like Asheville is littered with them. And I say that as if like it's not a bad thing. I love
it's a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. It's like but you like I'm sorry. What I mean is you can't throw a stick without hitting a brewery in this town.
Right.
And
so you were working. You had plenty of gigs and shows. You were playing songs.
I was working really hard, and then up until COVID, when COVID hit, and then when COVID hits, those are out the door, and I'm at home. So like I had moved home so that I could viably play for a living. I moved in with my parents first. They were gracious enough to put me up for a while, and I moved home so that I could make a living off of music and not be super concerned with like exorbitant rent in some major city.
Right.
And so, but then gigs dry up, and then what it turns into is me just being home with my parents, which there's nothing wrong with being home with your parents, but like
Yeah.
I was 25 and had things I was trying to do, and now I'm like back home under mom and dad's thumb, and I'm like, oh Lord, okay, what do I like? How do I get out of this? No, that's when Carry On enters into the picture, makes an offer. I'm able to move into a buddy's house for cheap rent in Brevard. Still hadn't moved to Asheville at that point. Now I live with one of my oldest and dearest friends who's an old time fiddler. And we have a music house here. There's guitars and fiddles and banjos everywhere. It's pretty fun. But I move out of the house. I get to work on Rose songs. And then, after Rose Songs is done, the label Carry On originally pitched to me. So like it had been about a full year of Rose Songs being out. It was received, decently well. I was really proud of, it was the farthest I had ever gotten up until that point. And the label pitches to me because they know when touring does open back up, we're going to be needing to do things like pretty tight on like if we can take things in a sedan and just bring in acoustic trio places, that's really what we need to be doing. Like that, it was a pragmatic decision.
Yeah.
At first, so they're like, hey, can you make an acoustic EP so that we have something to show as to what the show will be like? And that's where in sort of prepping for that acoustic EP, that's where there was a gear shift, and I was like, oh no, this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. And then the acoustic EP turned into a bigger production than what they were really banking on anyway. And then so it turned into Holler Choir, and I was like, this to them is like kind of a happy accident because they loved it, and I was like, this is actually what I want to do. And that's kind of where part of the reason why, creative differences, we started going our own ways. They weren't, they rightfully so, they weren't as confident about the string band thing. And so, that's how Holler Choir in the relationship in the time post label relationship, that's kind of how Holler Choir came to be.
And with Holler Choir, you talked about how it's kind of like you're finding your sound.
Yes.
And you mentioned that with this, now you're, you were a solo artist. Now you're in a band. I mean, it's still kind of like your band, I guess you could say. But
yeah,
it's kind of like you said. To me, it feels like you're kind of at the intersection of like friendship and musicianship, right? So I just wanted you to tell us like who's all in the band with you, who's in Holler Choir. I know it seems like y'all have a pretty big cast of musicians playing here and there. So just let us know who's in the band.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You like there's a few consistent faces right now. Yeah. So this is a great picture actually to reference. So Helena, who you can kind of see her like on the left, you can kind of see her a little bit. She's on the left of me. She's there. She's there. She's got a banjo. She's my primary partner in this project. We do all the gigs together. I don't particularly like playing by myself anymore. And Holler Choir is, I would say, growing increasingly so just as much about her voice as it is about mine. Right. So if you hear that EP, her voice is sort of like the dominant harmony vocal that's all over the record. And then so at this point, Helena is my primary collaborator on it. Norbert, who's playing stand-up bass. So her name's Helena Hunt, or Helena Rose is her artist name. Norbert McGettigan, who you see in that photo on the bass, is joining us more and more, and he wants to be in Holler Choir in the long term. He's singing harmony and playing stand-up bass. Ryan Stickman, whose back is to us, he's in the center. He's got a dobro in his arms. Longtime collaborator, really just a massive talent on the arrangement side. I'm a great, well, I shouldn't say I'm a great singer. I feel confident about my ability to sing. But Ryan, aside from being a great singer, he is one of the primary creative forces that helps arrange the vocals. So on this next record that you'll hear, tentatively called Songs Before They Write Themselves, Ryan has helped in a big way on just the vocal arrangement, really helping bring the choir component of it to life. Julian is on fiddle, Julian Pinelli. He's the fiddle player for Peter Rowan's band. And so far, we've gotten to do a few shows with him. We typically call on him when it comes time to do a record, because he's one of the most gifted fiddle players I've ever met. He's increasingly so a good friend. He's moving back to Asheville, but currently he's based in Nashville at the moment, and so we don't see as much of him. But and then back there next to Julian, the blonde guy with what looks like an archetype guitar, but is actually an octave mandolin. That's Bridger Dunnigan, and he's doing most of the fiddle in our live shows at the moment, and I think he's probably going to be doing that in the long term. But he's kind of our resident. It's not quite fair to say that he's a sound tech. I'd say he's a professional sound tech by day, but he's really an engineer. He does a lot of records for people locally here in Asheville. But he's our sound whiz. And so we lean on him in a big way. Whenever you show up in you show up in a hole in the wall sort of dive bar gig where the sound situation is not necessarily ideal, guys like Bridger are awesome to kind of troubleshoot all sorts of things that you otherwise wouldn't encounter if the place had a regular sound guy.
Yeah, he knows all the frequencies to cut when you got that squeal in your monitor.
Exactly. Right, exactly. And he's the kind of guy who's like, I think it's resonating a little too much at 400 hertz or something like that, Exactly. And so Bridger, who's on octave mandolin, Norbert and Helena are my most frequent collaborators. We love to get Ryan and Julian when we can, but as I mentioned, Ryan's kind of playing in Town Mountain for the time being. He's pretty busy with that, and Julian's, I'm sure Peter Rowan keeps him pretty busy. But we love to have every chance we get to have all of them, we try to get that. This picture's taken in Echo Mountain Studios locally here in Asheville, which is a really fun room to cut records in because as you can tell, there's a big stained glass in the background. It's this. They've converted this great big Baptist church room, or it might not be Baptist, but this great big, early 19th century, early 20th century church into a recording studio close to downtown in Asheville. And it's kind of Asheville, in contrast to Nashville, doesn't have a whole lot of legendary recording setups. I mean, there's great studios here, but it's not really known quite the way Nashville is. But arguably our most legendary one is Echo. Avett Brothers cut a lot of their records there. Band of Horses, Zach Brown. So it's an established place. It's a really great. There's also a lot of people go there to cut live videos, which we did one. You'll get to see when Songs Before They Write Themselves comes out. But yeah, that's more of the context on that photo. That photo's from this past December when we were working on that record.
So the Holler Choir EP came out in May of last
Hmm.
year. And in my understanding, I may have, I mean, Justin did the research on this part of it. I didn't see it. Are you using that to incorporate that into an album, or you're going to have an album of like new stuff?
I this songs before they write themselves album is all new stuff, but but I am to I am actually writing a few, or not writing. I am recording. I'm considering re-releasing that EP as an album with new recordings that I make to finish the songs that I still want to do from Rose songs. So like, if
Ah,
you go
okay.
back, so on Holler Choir, there's Nothing Left to Say, Carolina Moon, and Chrysalis, which are all from Rose songs.
Okay.
But the ones I really want to do for like to finish that record out for the Holler Choir sound, I want to do Medicine, Broken Horns, and trying to remember Medicine, Broken Horns, Amarillo, and I think there's one more. But there's a to to make my point, we are gonna re-record some of the rest of the songs from Rose songs. We might put that out. We may take the Holler Choir EP down and put it out as an album and have it like, hey,
Okay.
here's the Rose songs answer for Holler Choir, and this is what this is what we sound like. Or
Hmm.
we may just keep it up as is, kind of like release those four songs in their own little packaged thing sometime early next year. I
Okay.
it's more, it wouldn't be something that, like, so with this album, we're going to try to put out as much noise as we can about it, getting it out into the
Hmm.
world. This one that we just did, if I re-record those songs, that's more for the fans I already have, just to be like,
Right.
hey, like, here's all those songs in one spot, so you don't have to like be like, oh, I wish I could hear Medicine through the Holler Choirs. And
Yeah.
those fans are, oh, that number's only so big, right? At the for the that number's only so big for the time being. But at least, like, I get emails from time to time. They're like, please put this song back up, and I'm like, I will. I you know just give me a little bit of time. Um, but yeah,
So the nothing, sorry, not nothing. That's the name of the song. But the before they write themselves, is that what you're calling it?
yeah, I'm right. The album tentatively is called "Songs Before They Write Themselves," and
Before they
that's
write
kind of
themselves.
like, slightly, without using any sort of modernistic terminology. That's kind of a reference to, like, I'm sure you guys have seen it in the news. Like, you can get on Chat GPT, and if you want to,
Right.
you can write a love song to Biden from the
Okay.
perspective of Trump or something like that. And yeah, and if you go and have that song written, you'll notice it's not like a particularly good song, but those songs are only going to get better at that point. And so
That's right.
there's existential questions that I'm going to deal with later
Right.
after I've put this record out. But for now, that's why this record's called "Songs Before They Write
But
Themselves."
this album you've already got it recorded.
Yes, fully
Okay.
done. Where I think it's looking like August is when it's going to release.
Okay. Is this
We
with a label, or are you doing this completely on your own?
Well, so something that I wanted to try, there's, I think it's great. I think there's a lot of utility in partnering with a label potentially, and I think that's actually what we are going to do with this record. But instead of the traditional model from like the 70s and 80s, when record deal money was aplenty and it was everywhere, and everyone, it
Hmm.
was just drugs and sin everywhere in the best way possible, and as far as your eye could see. Like, back then, the
Back in the
label
good old
would
days
just,
is what you're saying.
yeah, well, yeah, back then they would, more or less, like, in their own way, they would write you a blank check to
Right.
cut the record that they haven't even heard yet.
Right.
And these days, there's only so many artists that are getting
Hmm.
into those types of deals. And so, and a lot of the time, if you keep things in that structure, the label is going to try to like get their fingers involved to try to, and because the suits think they know what's commercially viable, and the suits they're like, no, we know what's going to work, and like they change your record. It's better, in my opinion, to just come to them with a finished product and be like, do you like it? Yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And if they, and at that point, it's no longer a question of like they're not gonna, there's no deliberating on the direction the song is going. They have to just kind of take it at face value. Mm-hmm. And they like it that way too anyways, because it de-risks the whole thing for them. Absolutely. They can, well, it doesn't de-risk it entirely, but it at least takes out the question, is it going to be a record they can get behind?
Yeah, they don't have to fund it. They don't have to develop you and make your, like, help to come up with your sound and do all that kind of stuff. So I've heard, I don't mean to like completely.
No, please. I've been talking one-sidedly this whole time. I want to hear you guys talk more.
But I was just going to interject and say this is something I've heard before, just in the sense of record labels now are valuable mostly from the perspective of they kind of help you with with distribution and promotion and things like that you can do, because you don't necessarily have to have. I'm sure it helps to have record label money to go in and make an album. I'm sure it helps because, like, you got a fantastic record produced created in 2 days, basically, with the record label's help, which I'm sure wasn't cheap. But yeah, I've heard that before. It's kind of like the order of things has kind of gotten switched in terms of a record label finds you and then puts you in the studio and then does this. That's the way it used to be. Now it's more like a record label is waiting and you bring just like you're saying, you basically bring them the finished product and it's like, you like it or not. And if they do, then they can decide, they know what they're getting into. They can decide to put money behind it and put money behind you and do the promotion. And then, there's like, I have heard it said that way, where it's like, it's a little less of a risk because they already have a product, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, as much as you can take, I think it's so interesting because I always forget about artist development, and everything you just said is entirely correct. I always forget that in the pop world that's even a thing, that like the artist that you've picked is sort of this blank canvas, that with a lot of needs to, like, maybe blank canvas isn't the right term, but some of these artists, maybe they're weak in certain areas. Maybe they need more time on stage. Within Americana, that's quite foreign to me, because the only artists we're not in the popular eye in a way where it's like, we don't have we're not commanding most of the eyeballs in the music industry. And so if you have any chance in Americana, you kind of have to come as the full package, right. And to what you're bringing up, like, you have to come to the label, you and yourself have to be a fully developed artist, and maybe sometimes they take chances, but like, I really only see that, you only really see that in like pop country and in like super popular music, where that's where an artist needs to get, where artist development is something that is even kind of considered as a financial component that the label needs to invest in. Mm-hmm. For Americana, it's like, get good, son. That's that's kind of that's the message you'll get anywhere you go.
Get good. I like it.
But yeah, so kind of speaking back to that reversal of how, like, the structure, like, you come to these days, if you can help it, you come to the label with a finished product. I think everyone ends up happier that way. The only real downside to it is that typically artists aren't in the position to front the amount of money necessary to make a record. But I've also realized I've made very cheap records that I'm extremely proud of, that do, in the relative number pool that I'm working with, that do great. And then I I've done records that are, I've done records that are much more expensive that I'm like, we didn't really need to spend like we didn't really need to spend that amount of money on this component of the project. Like after having done this album that I just did, I don't see a world. There are, for every studio that's got prestige, that's got like, $1,000 day rate or higher, there is a equally good home studio out there that is $100 a day, that some retired MTV executive just like spent some like excess money on to make on his property so that musicians would hang around. That's a condensed version of that idea,
Right.
but home
There's
studios,
all points in between, right? Like there's
right,
the super expensive thing that you're paying for because this artist and this artist and this artist did, and you can pay that money, or you can
right,
find, yeah, or you can go super cheap and do it yourself, essentially. Like a lot of people can do
yeah,
it themselves, and I've tried to do that myself. Or then you can go find places with good equipment, people who know what they're doing, and you'll find like a spectrum of prices that you can
yeah,
pay. But I don't think, and again, I mean, you can tell when a record has gotten like $10,000 behind it or something, or
right,
$15,000 behind it. You can generally tell that, oh, there was some money behind this. But if you're not going, if you're going for something that's much more stripped down sounding in the first place, you may not need that, you know?
right, totally. That's entirely correct. And kind of what you're saying, there's so many situations in the year 2023 where you can find really good bang for your buck. You can still have access to that like kind of premium equipment if you just make other compromises like locations. Like a
Right.
lot of my friends, or a few of my friends, something they've told me is like kind of the new sort of like, if you want to call it a meta move, is going to Mexico and Mexico City and going to
Oh,
the pro studios there. And because your overhead to get there, or well, not overhead, but the cost to get there might be kind of high. But once you're there and in that environment, you may find yourself at a studio where it's significantly more cost effective to record there every day. It's just
that's
things like that.
yeah, that's a take I don't think I've heard before, or not a take, but that's a strategy I don't think I've ever heard before. It makes
Yeah,
sense though. I mean, you're
it
outsourcing
kind
instead of
of
outsourcing your engineering labor and your stuff like that, your space that you're using and equipment and all that in a way.
right. Well, it's like, I mean, you kind of you might even bring, it's still probably only a move because you still need the money to fly there. So
Right,
like it's still like you still need to have a decent budget for a record to do it. But
right,
if you wanted to book a month of studio time, that becomes a lot more viable if you're not doing
right.
it. If you're trying to book a month of studio time that isn't in your home studio, it becomes a lot more viable. This is like kind of like what I just mentioned. That's kind of more like what more like commercially successful artists. Some of them are doing. I say commercially successful, like the guys who are playing like 500-person club shows. They
Yeah,
might go that route.
yeah.
But and it's something I've considered. I'm not really quite there yet in that regard, but in the
Hmm.
future. In the future, I might take a whack at that and see how that pans out. It sounds like everything that has been described to me has sounded very pleasant,
Yeah.
so
So on the EP you had Mike Ashworth as the producer, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And he did the album as well.
Okay, I was
Well,
gonna ask
the
that.
EP was the pilot hole, and then the album is sort of like the bigger idea. We really um so Mike Ashworth is from Steep Canyon Rangers, as you maybe know, or maybe if you looked into.
Yeah.
they're a great bluegrass band. Mike and I, so this is something that I don't think has come up prior. Half of the boys that are in Steep Canyon Rangers are from Brevard, and half of them are from Asheville. And so growing up, I knew Ashworth, Woody. I know Ashworth probably the best at this point, but I would see Woody Platt and Mike Gigino and Mike Ashworth, just being given that all three of them are from Brevard. I would see them around, and they always were very supportive of what I was doing, and so they would kind of coach me from a distance from time to time. But Ashworth and I have been talking since I was like 18 about making records together.
Yeah.
And at the time, it wasn't in the cards financially to cut a record with him. But last year, or was it the year before last? Gosh, it's hard to keep track of this stuff. I guess it's the year before last. A couple years ago, we got to finally work together, and it was a blessing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what was I going to say? So with so you got the new record coming out, and with him producing it, you've talked a little bit about this kind of bringing in some other elements, but do you feel like it's good, or is it going, because you already finished it, but are we looking at sort of just an extension of the Holler Choir EP sound, kind of just that sort of traditional type sounding stuff, not traditional instrumentation is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, right.
Because you had mentioned earlier, you made a comment earlier about like steel guitar.
Yeah. Now it's that's such a good question, because the new record is definitely a little bit more of a synthesis of Holler Choir, like the Holler Choir strictly acoustic sound, and then a lot of elements of Rose songs. And so like pedal steel is on the record, which we didn't have pedal steel on. We had pedal steel on Chrysalis on the Holler Choir EP, but we didn't have pedal steel anywhere else on that record. Well, no, sorry, no, we had a solo on Mountain Air, but the point being, pedal steel wasn't featured in any big way. Now it is.
Okay.
There's a little bit of organ. There's some piano. There's really, it's and then we distorted at one point we distorted the pedal steel to make it sound more like a lap steel. And so there's still a little bit of that lap steel sound. Basically, we've effectively got drums, bass, guitar, octave mandolin, fiddle, banjo, pedal steel, dobro, octave mandolin. I think maybe I've even already said that. There's north of 12 different instruments on the record. And yeah, it does feel a little bit more like kind of, it's still more in the Holler Choir realm as far as like the sound goes, but I would say it has more grit than Holler Choir had. Okay. There's definitely like Darlene is a straight, like aside from having clawhammer banjo in it, there's a song on the record called Darlene, which is pretty straight shooting, honky tonk kind of sounding as far as the tonalities go. The song is still contemporary, but there's like, it's from the instruments we're using, it's got this really kind of loud, well, I shouldn't say honky tonk, but like this, it's got this loud driving kind of country band vibe to it. And there's some songs that are strictly bluegrass instruments. There's some songs that are more produced. With each record we've done, I've tried to cover a wide spectrum of sounds. Even within the songs, I've tried to cover different emotional bases. But this one, as far as the different tonalities that we tackle, songs before they write themselves, has like probably the widest spectrum so far. Lot more sonic ideas that get played with.
Cool. Are you guys gonna do singles? Justin, I feel like I keep jumping in. You look like you want to say something.
No. Go ahead. I've got a
I was
couple of
just,
things, but no, go ahead and finish your question.
yeah, I was just gonna ask you, because the other thing that's interesting about this is you've got, um, I mean, you've got a couple of singles that aren't on albums. Like I know that you got an acoustic version of Amarillo, that you've got out, but mostly you've got Rose songs and you've got the Holler Choir EP, with some singles off the album. But is that kind of the same approach? Are you going to put some singles out in advance, or are you going to?
Yeah, yeah. We should have our first single out by hopefully June. It kind of
Okay.
depends on, as I said, we're kind of in the shopping process. A lot of the characters that we're getting involved to help us promote the record have already been
Mhm.
cemented, but there's a few other, like, we're just now kind of closing in on a label.
Okay.
And just so that I don't jinx myself, I won't mention who it is, but uh, uh, we're just now closing in on a label, and so once we start really like um, getting deeper into those conversations,
hmm
we'll kind of solidify a timeline. But it looks like the first single will come out in June.
Okay. And are you thinking like single album, or because you said August you're thinking, so
Yeah,
I'm
probably
already
three.
plotting out the timeline here.
Probably three singles, and I'll
Okay.
definitely let you guys know. We might do four. We've also got like, so that picture you saw of Echo Mountain, we've got we've got companion live videos
Oh, nice.
for three
I
of the
was about
songs
to
that we
ask you that
did.
too, if you were going to put out like studio videos, like you did with Rose.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. One of them is I'm really stoked about. One of the singles on the record, the live video that we put out is more or less a one-to-one like synchronization of like what we're playing in that moment.
hmm
Some of the other ones are going to be like B-roll videos, so like just like a video that's kind of showing just like goofing off in the studio, stuff
Right.
like that.
Strapping up your guitar or whatever.
Right, right. But yeah, we've got tentatively three singles in mind. Um, and yeah, we should have that first one out early June.
Awesome.
And right now, you do have a video out for Carolina Mind, right? Got
Carolina Moon, yes, yes, yes.
Carolina, yes.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I did the same thing. I can't remember
I
them.
think I had Carolina. I had Carolina on my mind. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Good
That's
recovery. Yeah.
no, no, no. Don't worry about it, man. So yes, that video is always going to stay up. I love that video. I that was we did that shortly after doing. That's like a live audio video that we just did on my friend's porch out at Helena's property, and that was like a really great day to get a live video done. Um, and Joey Brown, who you saw playing stand-up bass in that song, he's playing drums in the band moving forward. Um, and yeah, but yeah, I think that answers your question. Sorry, I lost track. I just got I got excited about that video in my head for a second.
Yeah. No, it looks great. Obviously, the song sounds incredible. Jason mentioned it, and I know it's been mentioned by others as far as your like vocal talent. Rolling
Thanks,
Stone
man.
Country compared you to Bob Dylan and Bruce Hornsby. I feel like
I thought that was wild, but I loved that compare. I was like, I don't know how much I agree with that, but
yeah,
I love the idea of it.
yeah. To me, that's pretty like a big spectrum. But
Yeah,
maybe it's just like the Carolina bias or whatever. But like, I do hear James Taylor in your voice.
yeah,
There are
that's so
lots of
crazy,
times,
man.
and I mean, like that's not a bad thing. Obviously, he was very very successful. But like
Yeah,
I think I think when people hear that, that's part of what they hit on because it's like that's a very familiar sound, but it's not a sound that many people you don't hear that sound nowadays. Like you don't hear
hmm
that was a voice of the 70s and 80s. I mean, so was Bruce Hornsby, I guess so also. But
yeah.
no, I think that your voice reminds me of his on a few of your songs.
Thanks, man, dude. Well, the reason I say it's crazy is because it's only been in the past year And I don't think my voice has really changed much, but it's been in the past year that I've really started hearing that a lot, which I think is wild only because um, my parents played him nonstop when I was growing up, but I've listened to some of his music out of like in my elective time to listen to music, but I've always loved it. I've never put it on per se, like, or I don't, I should say that I very infrequently put it on, but kind of to your point, it must be ingrained in me at some level because, um, like my parents were playing, early James Taylor records in our house when I was 6 years old nonstop. Um, and it wasn't, I think that must have rubbed off on me in a way that I would only realize in the long term because while music was in our household, I didn't grow up singing. That I could sing to myself, at least in fourth grade. I was like, oh, I think I might be okay at this, but I'm not going to do this in front of people for like until I know for sure. And then it was in high school that I started singing in front of other people, and I was like, I'm getting a lot of good feedback on this. Maybe I should keep trying that and see where that goes. But so, it wasn't, growing up, like I heard those songs all the time, but I never picked up an instrument and played them. I didn't know how to play an instrument. So it's just funny how that comes together sometimes. But thank you. But up to put a bookend on it. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I mean, the sound is awesome. And then I guess so. You learned to play guitar and other instruments after high school. Is that when you kind of got this started?
Yeah, I tried to start playing guitar when I was in middle school, and the teacher that I had just wasn't giving me like a super approachable way of doing it. So like when I was and I didn't recognize that the teacher I had wasn't giving me an approachable way of doing it until after I started really learning guitar. And then I like went back and thought about what my teacher was doing. I was like, oh yeah, that was never going to work in a million years. But I tried playing guitar in middle school. I could not get my head around the riffs. I probably should have started with chords, should have started with chords and singing or something like that. But whatever, it didn't pan out. I dropped guitar in middle school. And then there was a short, it's funny to say, I'm not too embarrassed by it, but you probably remember in 2009, ukuleles were just like, they're just everywhere. You're just inundated with ukuleles everywhere you went. And sorry if the sun's finally going down here, so I'm going to turn the light on for a second. The ukuleles became a thing, and that was so much more approachable to me at the time. I was like, oh, it's only 4 strings, and you really only are supposed to play, like, you can fingerstyle or play with riffs on it if you want, but you kind of just play chords with it and sing. You don't really like do anything too complicated with it. And
Right.
so in learning ukulele, I was like, oh, singing is my thing. Songwriting is my thing. And so it didn't matter at that point. I switched to banjo because my uncle gave me one and I thought it was very novel. But like at that point, I was like, well, I'm just going to write on whatever instrument I happen to be playing for that stint of time. And so I switched to banjo. And then that's when, once I switched to banjo, it was banjo and guitar from then on out. I can't really play anything else at this point. I really only have experience with clawhammer banjo and fingerstyle guitar, some amount of rhythm guitar, but
Yeah. That's funny because I have a hard time with fingerstyle. Well, I mean, I can do it now, but that was for a long, long time. In fact, uh-oh, did we lose? You still there, Clint? Uh-oh.
sorry, I lost you. I somebody called me. I needed to hang up. He'll probably call me back later. This
I hope it
kind
wasn't
of the
your mom or
downs.
something.
Nah, it's okay. That might happen
Or the
again.
record label. The record
It's a
label, that would
record
be
label,
bad too.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
but yeah, hopefully, actually, well, it was my manager, so I'm wondering. Hopefully, cross fingers.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, back to your question, Jason. Or
I
what
don't
you were
remember what I
sorry,
was
you were saying
saying.
something.
I forgot what I was saying. What was I
You were
saying?
no,
Oh,
you
I
were
was
saying
just
you
saying.
started on yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying. We were. My friend Russell was. We were talking about this the other day because I've been writing a couple of songs and I've got a couple of songs that I'm playing fingerstyle and singing. The hard part for me was being able to fingerstyle pick and sing. I can strum and pick and all that stuff while I'm singing, but I always had a hard time something about the rhythm while I'm doing. And I'm currently like I play banjo and sing in a band, and I have a hard time with that sometimes. I got to really think about what I'm doing in order to make sure that I can sing and shift chords and still do the picking while I'm because I don't do claw hammer. I do the I don't even know what you call it. What the other
Would it be
style where
Scruggs style or three finger
Scruggs style.
style?
That would make sense. Scruggs style. Yeah, more like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it I mean it's tricky, man. I came into fingerstyle guitar because I went to bluegrass camp in Maryville, Tennessee one year. And I went for bluegrass banjo, but at that point I knew that I was going to not be doing bluegrass banjo for much longer.
Hmm.
Um, but I saw a younger guy with finger picks on, like the finger picks I had, and
Hmm.
he was playing this rhythmic thing, like this alternating thumb thing on guitar, and I was like, oh, what is this? And he's like, this is called Travis style, and I was like,
Oh
I
yeah.
got I got to know all about this, and so I really started diving into. I'm not really like I want to get more studious about it in the years to come. I really want to know how to like play a lot of Chet Atkins pieces and stuff like that. But like I mostly took those tools on so that I could kind of tackle my own style. My
Hmm.
biggest influence by far and away being Tallest Man on Earth, based out of Sweden. His fingerstyle guitar playing is like kind of where a lot of my rudiments are kind of like I based a lot of my rudiments off of.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so like it's tricky. Yeah, kind of back to what you're saying. It's tricky, man. It took me a while to like fingerstyle and play and sing at the same time. But once you get it, what I love about fingerstyle guitar is that it's a very self-sufficient form of music. You've got the
Hmm.
rhythm, you've got melody, you've got chords. And so you have all these things, whereas like a lead guitar player might be riffing, but without the chords underneath it, depending on the style he's playing, you might not really have the full sonic picture about like
Right.
what's but with fingerstyle you get a clear sense
Yeah,
of
it definitely
the
gives it
whole
like a better like a more interesting sort of bed like
right.
foundation or whatever on which
Yeah.
you can then sing with or whatever. And it's like because if you just somebody strumming a guitar comparative, relative to somebody able to fingerstyle and sing at the same time, I think it's a much more people will look at it and say that's I don't know that's I think it seems like it's objectively better. I don't know
Yeah.
like
A lot of the time I would agree. I mean, strumming can be just as much fun if you like or just as sonically complete. The way I like make strumming feel like it's self-sufficient is by like using alt tunings so that
oh
like
right right
you can kind of make melodies within um you can make melodies within the chords that you're strumming,
hmm
and that's always cool, but no, you're entirely right. It is like strumming can often feel very limiting.
hmm
So Um, but yeah, I love it. And clawhammer banjo, I switched to clawhammer from three finger style because I realized like I didn't I love John Hartford. I probably wasn't going to go the John Hartford route of like playing three finger style banjo and singing a song at the same time. And there's nothing that's such a cool way to do it. I fucking love that he does that, but it's just it wasn't going to work for me.
yeah
Yeah,
Well, Clint, the way you're doing it is working. So continue the good work. We appreciate having you on the show. And before we get you out of here, um, you've got a pretty busy week coming up, don't you, with some shows? And so if you'd like to plug your shows, how people can find you on social media, we've got your websites scrolling across the screen right now. So definitely check that
great.
out. But Yeah, tell us about what's coming up as far as your shows.
Yeah. So as you can see, April 6th, we're at the Flatiron in Greensboro. That's gonna be a great time. Wes Collins is opening up the show. I'm looking forward to hearing him. I can't recommend that record enough. So I like if you guys get some free time, check out this Wes Collins guy that's opening up the show because he's got a really interesting story from what I'm hearing. I haven't heard his story from him directly, but what people are telling me is that he used to write songs. He was a librarian up until COVID, and COVID hit, and then he wasn't working as a librarian anymore. And I might be butchering the story, but this is just what I'm told. And then he started writing songs again, and he's just a tremendous talent. On the 7th, we're kind of doing a free show in Charlotte, and then we've got stuff going on. We're going out west with Cannon and the Boxes to play to go be a part of our buddy's wedding. Our buddy is a guy named Justin Osborne who's getting married out there, and if you want to keep up with us, if you're trying to keep up with Holler Choir and everything we're up to, best place to do that is probably Instagram for now, or you can go to hollerchoir.com. But yeah, Justin and Jason, I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. It's been great getting to kind of talk shop and get into the nitty gritty of it all.
Yeah, I really enjoyed having you on here. And keep us in the loop if you are, we'll follow you anyway. Obviously, we're following you, but if we can catch you in Texas at some point, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I wish so we are going to Texas. We're playing the wedding. I wish we were doing a show in Texas, but we are playing in Mobile, Alabama. I don't know how far that is from y'all. We're playing in New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama. Probably a hot minute given the given the Google Maps routes that I've been looking at. But yeah, I'll keep y'all updated. Holler Choir is trying to come to Texas in either late 2020 or the second half of 2023 or sometime in 2024. So hope to see you boys, and hope to see you boys then. It's been great talking to y'all. I hope to get to catch a beer in person sometime.
Hell yeah, and we'll push we'll share your record when it comes out, or your single actually when it first comes out, and make sure to keep everybody in the loop on that.
Thanks so much, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and speaking of Texas, Jason, you've got a bunch of shows coming up also. You want to play these real quick? Yeah.
Yeah, I have, so they're not my shows. They're Jaret.
You're in the band though.
I'm in the band.
Yeah.
I'm the guy over there in the little on the right. Anyway, yeah, Jaret Ray Reddick. We're gonna play Dan Silverleaf on the 6th, which is Thursday, and Magnolia Motor Lounge on Friday. We're going to be. It's funny because we got these two shows with West Texas Exiles, who I'm trying to get booked on here. Maybe next week actually, but we'll talk about that. But we got these shows booked with Mason and the Gin Line and the West Texas Exiles, and we're like reversing order. So in Denton, I believe we're headlining, I think, and then in Fort Worth, I believe it's the West Texas Exiles headlining. I think that's how it's worked. It's working. We're like switching places.
Yeah.
And then the following week you got Lava Cantina and Lola's, and then Jaret's going by himself. Oh no, sorry, the 15th at Three Links. I'm doing that one too. But the 17th and 18th, that's just Jaret is like on a radio tour, and so he's doing these song swaps, which. I don't know if you know this guy, Justin, but have you heard of Scotty Haley? Do you remember a kid named Scotty Haley from Cisco?
I don't, but you actually told me about this. Yeah, he's from our hometown. Yeah.
Anyway, Jaret's doing that with him in Abilene. That's what we got.
Very cool.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking out your music, Jason. Well, the Jaret Ray band that you play with.
Yeah. Thanks. I got some music too. I'll send you my music too. But
please do.
Yeah, Jason plays what? How many instruments do you play for Jaret? You play 3 instruments? 4?
I've played 4 total. but usually I only play three. I play the mandolin, the fiddle, and the banjo, and I had to sort of teach myself the banjo for this band. So,
Cool. That's rad. Love that, man.
Well, that's very cool. Last thing, Clint, have you ever done a song swap, or is that something that's not? It's I know it's big. It's big in Texas, right,
it
Jason?
is
It's a
big in
big.
Texas. It
Yeah.
is
Oh,
getting a big deal.
what is the song swap? I'm
It's the
not
song swaps
familiar.
like when you book a show with another songwriter, and you're essentially just hang, uh, trading off songs, and you're telling your stories, and you've got a partner to kind of talk to and kind of tell your you're gonna tell your stories, and there's
It's
an
like
interaction, but
storyteller
it's
kind of
basically two
deal.
individual songwriters
Oh,
on stage.
that's cool. It's funny. The format we normally see that here, it's more of a we more or less see that in writers rounds, like
Right.
on stage writers rounds. It might be like a trio.
Mm-hmm.
But as a duo, it makes a lot of sense because it's like
Yeah.
half the time you can get off the stage and grab it.
That's right.
Maybe you wouldn't want to do. Maybe you get off stage and get a beer, but maybe you don't. But in either case, it sounds lovely. I want to try this. But
You should. I highly recommend it. It's fun. I mean, like you said, you don't like to play alone, so it's way
yeah,
better than playing a solo acoustic show. That's for sure.
yeah, I'm gonna try that sometime.
So, Clint, once again, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time, telling us all about Holler Choir, what you've got coming up. You got new music. You're playing a bunch of shows. We're really excited to see where this goes with you. And thanks again for being on the show. And we also want to thank you if you're watching this now. If you're watching this now or later on YouTube, doesn't matter. But if you're watching us, please, give us a like the video, subscribe to our channel. Those little clicks actually matter, and especially when you're trying to do this podcast game, whether it be YouTube or Spotify. Following people, liking stuff, it really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, we're also available on Spotify. So if you prefer audio over video, you can listen to us on Spotify. However, we're also the video. This is also going to be on Spotify tomorrow. So check us out on your phone if you want to on Spotify. It actually looks better because it's on a smaller screen. Um, so please do that. And we're also on social media as everyone is in the world. We're on Instagram and Twitter at LFDT Pod. Again, at LFDT Pod. LFDT, of course, stands for Let's Freaking Do This. We're also on Facebook, right, Jason?
Supposedly.
Supposedly. Yeah, the rumor is we're on Facebook. So just search for Let's Freaking Do This. You'll find us. And on that note, Jason, any parting words?
Nope.
Nope.
I'm glad. Nope. I'm a man of few words, I guess. I don't know. But anyway.
So for Clint, thanks again for joining us. For Jason, I'm Justin saying thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.